Hey, how's everybody doing? Hop on in. I'm going to share this to our Facebook group in case you are not getting this yet. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're at, chat, use some, let's see, how do I share this? I feel like I should know these things, honestly. This is embarrassing. Hop into our chat. There we go. And doesn't matter what social media platform you're on. If you chat with us, I'm gonna get I'll get your messages. So every Friday, 3 o'clock, I'm answering questions, your questions, and you can send those questions into ask@firstsaxe.org. Ask@firstsaxe.org. Any question you want to send in is free game. Would love to get your questions. Would love to answer your questions. So, all right, let me get this shared and we'll get started. Cool. Okay. So, hello, Noni. Hello, Rhonda. Hello, Penny. How are y'all doing today? Friday, y'all. Friday. It's a good day. It's a lazy day. As a matter of fact, I'm 3 minutes late because I sat down to get this stream started, and then I looked at myself and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I look haggard. I look terrible. You deserve better than this." And so I tried to like shave a little bit real quick so that I could be a little bit more presentable for you for this. Okay, so I hope you can appreciate that. All right, so let's get down to it. So today's question comes in from Kaylee, and she says, thinking about the Ahmaud Arbery situation, how do we, the church, pursue racial reconciliation? How should the church pursue racial reconciliation? And so this is a good question. This is a question a lot of people have been asking for some time now, and it's an important question that we should not dismiss. I know that in a culture, a society that's as polarized as ours is right now, these are conversations that a lot of people want to dismiss. And there's a lot of reasons for that. For some people, it's controversial. For some people, it's uncomfortable. Other people don't think the issue is an issue. And so there's a whole host of reasons why people don't have conversations about this topic. That is someone said handsome. Yeah, well, I do my best. All right. There's a whole host of reasons why people don't want to talk about these types of things. But we have to talk about it because it's important. Okay. So if you're not really keen to the story and what transpired back on February 23rd, Ahmaud was jogging down the street, and I've seen a lot of people jogging down the street through coronavirus. More people walking around now than ever before. One of the benefits of all the shelter in place stuff is that life is slowed down. You see the face of your neighbor. You're spending time with your family. Those are all good things. Back on February 23rd, he's jogging down the street. And two men, a father and a son, were under the impression that he had committed a burglary. They were going to do a citizen's arrest. And there's a video out there. You can watch it yourself. It's like 36 seconds long. He's jogging down the street. Truck is stopped in the middle of the road. The son is in the bed of the truck holding a .357 Magnum. The father is standing next to the driver door with a shotgun. Dad tries to stop him, and he doesn't want to be stopped. And then the son shoots him 3 times with a .357, and he dies. And then this was 2 months ago. Nothing was done. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case, and within 36 hours, they had warrants to arrest both the dad and the son for felony murder charges. and they're both now in custody. And so, things like this happen, and every time something happens where a black person is killed, it stirs up the conversation. Okay, and a lot of people, like I said earlier, they feel uncomfortable with the conversation. They feel uninterested. They don't think that the issues are really issues. And so the question is an important one: how should the church pursue racial reconciliation? All right, and so this is look at that. Wonderful. I need a napkin. This is my afternoon pick-me-up. So we got to have a conversation, all right? And this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, talking with other people about. I don't feel that I'm an expert on this, but I do have some thoughts that I would like to share. And so kind of the main idea here for me is that, true change, true racial reconciliation, it's not going to happen through an institutionalized movement, right? Like, the governments, can pass laws and stuff that's helpful. Churches can make statements. Southern Baptist Convention can pass resolutions condemning racism, so on and so forth. And those things are helpful, but those things that in the end are not going to be the activity that enacts true and lasting change, because really it's a person problem. It's a person problem. It's a me problem, a you problem, an everybody problem. And we got to talk about these things as a church, because here's what we know from Scripture, all right? Number one, we know that God created mankind in his image, all right? That means every man, woman, child, regardless of your race, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of anything that could be used to describe you, all people are made in the image of God. That means all people inherently have value and dignity. You don't have value because you contribute a certain amount to society. You don't lose value because you age or you become disabled and you can no longer contribute. A human being has value because a human being is made in the image of God, and all people are made in God's image. All right, and so that's something that's critical. I mean, this is the truth that really drove William Wilberforce to work as an activist to end the slave trade in England. Right, all people are created in the image of God, and all people are justified in the sight of God by the grace of God through faith in the Son of God, Jesus. Right, so these are things that we share. This is intrinsic equality among people as human beings. Okay. So these are important things, and that's why I say it's a personal. It has to be a personal solution. Like it requires people, just like you and me, waking up to the issues that are at hand, and being changed to do something about it. Okay, so I think that there's two really big ways that you and I can be better equipped and prepared to be people who make racial reconciliation happen. All right, and here's kind of the two avenues. These kind of both go together. All right, the first is that we got to educate ourselves. Okay, if you're a majority culture person, all right, i.e. Anglo white folk, okay, racism and an experience of racism is something that's foreign to you. It's foreign to me. By the very definition of what it is. Okay, and so we have to be educating ourselves about things that we don't understand from personal experience, and you can do that by reading. Okay, reading, that's helpful. Okay, we should all be educating ourselves through reading good books. Several years ago, I was at Barnes and Noble. And there's two dangerous places for me to be. All right. One is at a bookstore. Okay. Half-price books, Barnes and Noble. I'm pretty sure that's the only two bookstores that are still in existence. All right. If I go in a bookstore, I'm leaving out with books, plural, like piles of books. Okay. The other place dangerous for me to be is the Apple store. I've barred myself from going in there because I see pretty shiny things and I'm like, I must have them. I was at Barnes & Noble several years ago, and I was just kind of browsing the shelves. Didn't really have anything in particular that I was looking for, but I was just looking to see if anything popped off the the shelves. And so I came across this book that was written by Dr. Beverly Beverly Daniel Tatum, and the name of the book is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And so, I saw that and I thought, that's a strange title to a book. What in the world is this about? And it got me thinking, because I grew up in South Irving. All right, I grew up with a lot of friends who were from different countries, different racial backgrounds, and so I grew up. I had friends who were people of color, and when we got into middle school, I noticed this change. All right, guys that I'd be hanging out with, sitting at the lunch table with, around 7th grade, there was something that changed, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand as a 7th grader, right? But then I'm sitting here browsing the bookshelf, and I see this book, and it started getting me thinking about things. So I read this book, okay, and this book was incredible. I highly recommend it. I don't have it here; it's at my office, but it's a great book. You can get on Kindle and get on Audible. You can buy it paperback. It's called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? It's by Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. All right, and I learned some things in this book that I didn't even know were things. Like, one of the things I learned as I was reading this book was something called racial identity development. And as a majority culture person, you grow up in a world where, most everybody looks like you. You're watching Disney movies and the hero and the princess, and, it looks like you. You're watching television, sports, like, most of the heroes, most of the icons, most of the celebrities, most of the successful people, the people in the, the rom-coms who, fall in love against all odds and end up happily ever after. Like, all of those people look like you. And so if those people don't look like you, then when you become of an age where you begin to realize that you're different, it impacts a person. And so there's this whole thing called racial identity development. What does it look like to be a successful man who is Black or who is Latino or who is, and so this is a thing that I was learning about, right? And it's like, I didn't even have categories for that. It wasn't on my radar. This is not something I ever personally experienced or dealt with. Another thing I learned in that book that was really formative for me was she offers this definition of racism that actually comes from someone else, a guy named David Wellman. And she offers this definition of racism, and she says this was surprising to me. I had never thought of defining racism the way that she defines it in her book. I'd always thought of racism as being, actively hating other people of different races. That was what I thought was racism, and because I wasn't actively hating other people of different races, then I wasn't a racist. So I'm not contributing to the problem, so it's not my problem, right? That's how I think a lot of, majority culture people think about racism. That's how I thought about racism before I started reading this book. Well, she gives this definition. It comes from David Wellman. She says racism is a system of advantage based on race. A system of advantage based on race. That is a very different definition than the one I was walking around with. I've had conversations with people about these types of things, and I'm going to save some of that for later. You guys feel free to engage in the comments, right? I'm here with you. This is a conversation, all right? So the last comment I'm seeing is that I look handsome because I barely was shaved rapidly 5 minutes ago. That's the way that she defines racism in her book, a system of advantage based on race. And another thing she talked about in there that was like, boom, powerful, was she talked about 3 different kinds of racists. And back in 2017, after the white supremacist drove his car into a crowd of people protesting a rally, and one person was killed, and I think 26 or 28, something like that. Other people were injured. I wrote a blog called 3 Different Types of Racism in America Today, and you can find it on my website, jaredwitt.com, if you want to read it. I also shared it on Facebook today. It's something I wrote dealing with how Christians should think about racism, but also bringing in some of the stuff that I had learned from this book. But she says, yeah, there's 3 types of racists. Okay, so you have an active racist. Okay, she calls it what she calls an active racist. This is a person who is actively hating other people of different colors. Okay, that's pretty much what the average majority culture person thinks racism is, period. She says that's one type of racism. You have an active racist. So maybe you're not actively hating people of other colors. Okay, so that doesn't mean that you're not a racist. Okay, this is where it gets controversial. It just means that you're not an active racist. Okay, that's one category of racism. The second category that she mentions in her book is what she calls a passive racist. Most majority culture people fall into this category. All right, a passive racist is a person who thinks of racism as actively hating other people of different colors, so on and so forth. I don't do that. I'm not a racist. I'm not involved in the problem. Okay, that's a passive racist. Okay, you're someone, you're not actively being racist. You're not actively opposing racism. You're just existing in the middle. You're passive. Okay, that's a passive racist. And then the third category is what she calls an anti-racist. Okay, an anti-racist is somebody who recognizes injustice and speaks out and acts out against it. All right, so those are kind of the 3 buckets that she talks about in her book. And for me, that was really convicting. It was really convicting because I thought, okay, I don't actively participate in racism. I'm not, going to white supremacist rallies. I'm not putting a sheet on my head. I'm not saying racial slurs or telling jokes that are, inappropriate and racial. Like, I'm not doing those things. So I'm not contributing to the problem. I'm not a part of the problem. I don't have anything to do with it. When she threw in this whole idea of a passive racist and an anti-racist, it was really convicting to me because I thought, I don't really think about racial issues very often. I don't really consider myself to be somebody who should be concerned with these types of things. I was passive, right? And then, that was a challenge because now I'm like, I'm being opened up to this whole other idea of the fact that, like, there is injustice in the world. And as a person who is for righteousness, as a follower of Jesus, I should be able to identify injustices. I should be able to stand with people who are being disenfranchised for unjust reasons, right? And so that really kind of started me on this trajectory of exploration and learning and building relationships with people of other people of color and all of these things. Okay, so education is the first thing. One of the things that we do in our culture, and I don't like this about our culture, and I talk about this a lot, is that we're so polarized. We're so divided. Whether that be because of social things, socioeconomic things, racial things. I mean, there's 150,000 things that keep people apart. And we don't know, a lot of things. And what we don't know of, we're afraid of. And so what we do is we just kind of congregate with other people who look like us and think like us and talk like us and live like us. And then we form opinions about other groups, right? We get all these tribes. And so this is my tribe, and we have opinions about that tribe. And rather than actually engaging that tribe and getting to know that tribe, we're just going to form opinions about that tribe. And then we're going to boost our own confidence and our conviction by just reaffirming with each other in our tribe that what we believe and what we think and the way we act and behave is the best. And this is like, you see this all over our culture today, and it's unhealthy. It's not good. That's being a sheep, right? Like, we're not thinking critically about issues that matter. And so that's a problem. We gotta do that. We can educate yourself. So there's, the resources that are available, they're everywhere. Okay. So I got a few of these around my shelf. So this one is called Divided by Faith. This is a great book, taking a look at how there's this paradox in the church, right? You've got leaders of white evangelical churches who are speaking out against racism, who are saying we need to pursue racial reconciliation, but then Sunday morning is still super divided. All right, W. Du Bois wrote this book called The Souls of Black People, where he just talks about Black experience leading into the 20th century. This is called New Jim Crow, which deals, I think they actually made a Netflix doc on that, just deals with mass incarceration in African American communities. This one is called The African American Century. This one is great. If you want to dig into some reading, like, this is a great place to start, because this just looks at different African American men and women who have shaped our culture, people that you maybe don't even know about. I mean, it's all over the place, from writing to music to sports to politics to etc. Right? I mean, it's just the whole gamut. And so, I think one thing that anybody can do that is healthy, okay, and good, is to just start reading things that expose you to the experience of other people who aren't like you. Learn, and being educated is always a good thing. So I think that's pretty simple. But how does the church pursue racial reconciliation? Well, it starts with people educating themselves on the issues. And by educate yourself, I don't mean watch a 2.5-minute YouTube video, right? Or I don't mean like go to the group of people who are just going to reaffirm your preconception and your bias, right? Like, get out there and get engaged in a conversation that's taking place and learn from other people, okay? It's a good thing, right? The scriptures say, test everything and hold fast to what is good, okay? This is thinking critically. It's exposing yourself to other people's experience that is foreign to you. All right, so there's a lot of great things. There's a blog called The Witness, a Black Christian collective. They write a lot about faith and theology, news, current events from a Black evangelical perspective. There's a podcast they produce as well called Pass the Mic. And then there's just great books. Like, there's a memoir called We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he was a writer and writing about current events and stuff. And it's just sort of a memoir of his experience through the Obama presidency. Really interesting book to read. There's some great fiction books. So Colson Whitehead wrote a book called The Underground Railroad, fiction book. It won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction back in 2017, I think. One of my big life goals is to read all of the Pulitzer Prize winning fiction books, and I've read probably 20 of them so far. That was one of them, and in fact, he just wrote another book that I haven't read it yet, but it's called The Nickel Boys, and it won the Pulitzer Prize in 2020. And so Colson Whitehead is one of 4 people in history who have won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction twice. All right, so that's the point. Like, expose yourself to the experience and the explanation of other people. We have to learn. Okay, that's education. This is critical. All right, and what happens is, I would recommend start here. Like, you start learning things. I learned about racial identity development. Totally foreign concept to me. Had no idea that was even a thing. It was not on my radar anywhere. And so then I started to ask some of my friends, like, I read about this, and was that your experience? And so I started hearing from other people. Okay, and that's the second step, right? I feel like relationships is the next step, right? Like, think about this right now. Like, if you're a majority culture person, if you're a white man or woman, okay, how many friends, close friends, do you have who don't look like you, right? I mean, that's a question we should ask. That's a question a lot of people don't want to ask themselves. I think one of the greatest fear that a white person has is being perceived as or accused of being a racist. Like, we just don't like it. So it's like we want to avoid the conversation like the plague. avoiding things doesn't change anything, right? So, yeah, so relationships, we have to. I was talking earlier about how polarized our culture is and our society is, and how we like to huddle up with our tribe, and rather than engage other tribes, we just like to form opinions about them and then reaffirm our opinions with one another, patting them on the back. You're right. You're right. That's true. That's true. That's true. And then we just get reinforced in our ignorance. It's potentially ignorance, right? Because we don't know any perspective or explanation or experience other than our own. And so that's unhealthy. Well, how do you combat that? How do you make that change? Well, you build relationships with other people, okay? You make friends with people of color. You build strong, bonds with people whose experience is different than your experience, and you put yourself in a posture of learning, right? Listening. It's wild. Like, learning and listening. When you allow yourself to be isolated, or when you live in sort of a, with this tribal mentality, and these are my people and all the other people are wrong and it's us against the world, or when you let, polarization just separate you from other people. And that's kind of how things are in our culture. Then it's easy to dehumanize another person, right? That's why when it comes to controversial issues in our culture, there's so much hate and outrage and violence, right? And it's not just around racism. Like, it could be around abortion. There's people who have conviction that abortion is wrong, right? And there's obviously good reasons for that. All human beings are created in the image of God. If there's a human being inside of you as a creation of God, someone with intrinsic value, worth, and dignity, you got to protect them, okay? Then you've got young women who are pregnant and afraid, and they think, because this is what they've been taught, and they don't know they think the hope, the solution is to have an abortion. And then when they're like terrified, they're going to this place doing something they don't probably want to do, they feel they have to do, and then they're met with someone who's saying, you're killing babies. And they're like, I hate you because you're saying I'm a murderer and you don't understand like, all of this is because people don't understand. There's distance, and when there's distance, it's easy to dehumanize someone, right? So how do you change that, right? I mean, you could say the same thing when it comes to the LGBTQ community. Like, it drives me nuts when I see Christians protesting LGBTQ because they disagree with same-sex marriage. You can have a conviction, it's fine. It's a right conviction, in my opinion, but the way that your conviction is communicated is designed to create greater division rather than to bring any sort of unity. And I've never seen anybody say, you know what, I want to follow Jesus, when they're met with a sign that says you're going to hell, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. Jesus encountered some really messy people, right? He had a prostitute brought before him and accused by the religious people of committing adultery and needing to be stoned, which is what the law said. And Jesus did not respond by, he wrote in the sand, right? He didn't write on a sign and say adulterers go to hell, and that's where you're gonna go and pick up a stone and throw it at her, right? Like, we don't know what he wrote in the stand, but we do know he says, whichever one of you has no sin, you go ahead and cast the first stone. And then people realized, I'm not perfect, and they walked away. And the woman was left there. This is so radical. And Jesus says, woman, does nobody condemn you? And she said, no. And he says, neither do I. Go and sin no more. It isn't a firm or sinful lifestyle, right? It's called grace. It's called grace. Like, this mercy. Like, I am not giving you the punishment you deserve. I'm not. And thank God that he doesn't give us the punishment we deserve, right? Because none of us would have hope if that were the case. So, long story short, relationship matters, right? We have to bridge the gap. If you stay distant, all right, And if you remain in your tribe and you just let yourselves reinforce your opinions that you have without ever testing those things by engaging in other people of different tribes with different experience and building bridges, then it's easy to just dehumanize other people. And Jesus said, I'm calling you to become fishers of men, fishers of people, not, dehumanizers of people. Well, how do you win people to Christ? You have to break through all the barriers with grace and mercy and compassion and patience, and then you have to meet people where they're at, and not just to tell them what's right and wrong, but to know them and show them that they matter because they're made in the image of God, right? You win people with grace, not with law. And so how do you do this? Well, one is we got to educate ourselves. Number two is we got to start building relationships with people. Okay, we have to build relationships. I used to listen to, when I was in high school and college, I was a big fan of this group called Bright Eyes, and their music is just really like terribly produced, and the guy can't sing. I don't know. If you go and find it on Spotify and you've never listened to it before, you're probably like, who in the world would listen to this? Okay. But I loved that it was very poetic. The lyrics were pretty rich, and, there's a lot of like, just surface level nonsense that people are singing about on the radio. And so a lot of it's satire, and there's this lyric that always kind of sticks in my mind. And he says, if you can't understand something, then it's best to be afraid. And it's satire, all right? He's not saying that if you can't understand something, it's best to be afraid. He's making a social comment. This is what we do. We don't understand something, so we're afraid of it. We don't understand why other people vote the way they do, dress the way they do, live the way they do. And so we don't understand. We're afraid. And so what do? Well, we retreat, right? We retreat and we seclude ourselves. It doesn't help, okay? It's not healthy to live that way. We have to think critically about things. And building relationships matters, right? Because if you're distanced from other people, you can dehumanize them, and then their problems don't matter to you, right? But if you build bridges and you build relationships with people, then all of a sudden a person's experience becomes personal to you because you have a face and a name, right? That you associate with the experience and with the heartache and with the pain, right? And so when we meet people where they're at, when we build bridges to other people, like their pain, their experience, their story becomes personal. And that is a really good place to be. And so I think we need to build, you need to build relationships. We all do with people who have different backgrounds and experiences and races, et cetera. And we need to put ourselves in a posture of listening. Like, tell me your story. What is your experience? And I'm telling you, when we move from a place where we're dehumanizing others into a position where other human beings appear to be human to us, right, which they are, that changes the game. And all of a sudden, some of the stories that you hear, they hit you a lot more personally. You actually care because you've done the hard work of building bridges and making relationships. And then when you hear some of the stories, you can't just ignore it. You can't just change the channel. You can't just look the other way. You have to face reality, right? And this is the crisis, because you do that, you're going to be faced with a dilemma. You can, stop up your ears and close your eyes and stay in a place of passivity, or you can listen to the stories of real people and their real experience and be moved to activity, right? I mean, and that's a crisis. That's a burden that a lot of people, they just want to stay away from that. But that doesn't solve anything. All right. A lot of people, they stay distant because they don't understand that a person, well, bottom line is we cannot interpret other people's experiences for them. Okay. So just because you've never had an experience, just because you've never been afraid when you got pulled over that you might get shot, just because you've never sent your son on a jog and wondered if he would come home, doesn't mean there's other people. Those fears are real. Okay. And so we think, well, since I haven't had that experience, then what they're claiming to have experienced can't be true. I can't relate to that. That doesn't make sense. It can't be true. They must be mistaken. And so then we put ourselves in this ridiculous position where we're like, no. Let me interpret your experience for you. It's not racism. It's, crime is your problem, not systemic racism. It's not racism. It's unwed pregnancies. That's your problem. It's not racism. It's right. And so we put ourselves in this ridiculous position where we presume that we can interpret people's experience for them, and that just doesn't make any sense. I talked about this in a sermon one time, and I gave this example of Angela when we had our kids, and so we had two sets of twins, and she had a C-section with both of them, and the recovery process for that is longer than just a normal birth, and so she's in pain, right? She's in pain. At least she's telling me she's in pain. I've never experienced the pains of labor. I can't relate to that, right? And we have these two infants, and they're in the room, and they're crying. Luckily there were these nurses there who were, helping take care of them, and that was nice. And I wish that had continued on when we got home, but it didn't, right? And so, had I said to her, hey, you need to toughen up. We have these two children. They're crying. They're in pain. They're hungry. I got to take care of them, and now I also got to take care of you. It can't be that bad. Get over it. That would be, I'd be slapped in the face. I'd be sleeping on the couch for the next 6 months. That would be foolish. Everybody who agrees with that. But that's what we're doing, right? When we don't understand another person's experience, but then we say, no, that can't be right. I can't relate to that. You must be mistaken. Here's actually how things are. All right. You say distant, you dehumanize people. That can happen. All right. No, and he said bad. That didn't happen, by the way. Just let me clarify. I did not say that to Angela, nor would I ever say that to Angela. All right. Because I like to sleep in my bed and on the couch. Okay. But this is what happens. You say distant, you can dehumanize another person. But when you build bridges and you build relationships, their pain, it becomes personal to you. Maybe you can't empathize with them. You don't have the same experience, but you can hear them. You can have compassion. You can sympathize. And it's only when we let other people tell their stories and we build relationships, when we learn to care for and extend compassion to others, that we begin to be changed in our attitudes towards certain things that at one point were inconvenient or unimportant, right? All of a sudden, these things matter. Okay. That's how, that's how these things go. Okay. So, let's see where we're at here. So those are the two main things I wanted to share to answer the question, right? How does the church pursue reconciliation, racial reconciliation? Well, it happens when people make it a priority to be educated about these things. And it happens when people put in an effort to build bridges to other people who don't look like them or necessarily think like them or live like, you know what I'm saying? We have to build bridges to people. And I really do feel that when you open yourself up to learn even things that maybe at first you're uncomfortable with, or maybe you don't even, in the end of it, agree with everything you read in a book. That's fine. I've never read a book where I agreed with everything that it said other than, the good book. Come on now. I had to say that, or somebody was going to be like, wait a second, you don't agree with everything in the Bible? By the way, just as an aside, when I was 22 years old, I was foolish. Yes. Was anybody else foolish when they were 22 years old? And so I'm in school, and I'm learning all of this doctrine and theology and blah 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 blah. Well, there was a tweet from Rick Warren, okay, on Twitter. And, I kind of stay out of the Twitter because, Twitter gets you in trouble. Okay. So anyways, he tweets about 5 books every Christian should read this year. And one of the books was written by a pastor that I liked a lot. And I was foolish and I responded. This is great that I'm talking about this because I'm distant. Me and Rick, we don't know each other. All right. And he's just this giant influential pastor. And so it's easy for me to look at him as an icon and not a person. I can dehumanize him, which is what I did. So I tweet him back and I say, hey, I can think of 66 other books that pastor would recommend people read this year than his own book. And I thought, I got you. Jesus juke, right? You're pushing all these man books. You're not telling anybody to read the good book. And then he responded to me, which I did not expect. And he said, Jared, there are books with a little b and the book with a big B. And he said, I'm just recommending some books, little b. And then I felt super humiliated and humbled. All right, I had to eat some humble pie there. But yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. Like we you can read books, okay, and educate yourself. You can eat the meat, spit out the bones. It's fine. Building relationships, another key, right? You can't be distance. You got to build bridges, hear stories, ask questions, learn, get uncomfortable. It's totally fine. But I think when those things happen, right, we're beginning to change we ourselves are beginning to change. And as we change and we begin to have a greater understanding, we begin to relate to people with real experience that's different than ours, and we're able to extend compassion and sympathy, and then we're being woken up, right? We're moving from this passive place of sleep to now, like, I can see some things now that I didn't see before. Now I really feel like I should say something or do something or be a part of something to make a difference. And it's only when more and more people allow themselves to be exposed to other thoughts and to be educated, and it's only when individuals allow themselves to build relationships with other people who have had experiences different than theirs that you begin to wake up. And when you wake up, then you can see things you didn't see before, you can hear things you didn't hear before, you notice things you didn't notice before, and that's when you're starting to move down a path towards reconciliation. So that's the answer, all right, to the question. And I did want to let people know that one of our members, Tammy, she's actually put together a run with Ahmad today at 6, okay? And so I don't know if Tammy is tuning in right now. I tried to share that, but for some reason I couldn't do it. So go ahead and post that in the comments if you want, Tammy. But I did want to give a shout out while we're wrapping up, because one of the things I'm super proud as your pastor right now, talking to all you people who go to our church, super proud, because one of the things that we talk about at a lot is that ministry is accomplished by people, not by professionals. I've said that so many times. Hopefully you have heard me say that before. And one of the things that I've talked about a lot is how the old model of where the church is the central hub, where we all go to be served by the professionals who have all the ministry solutions to all of our life problems, like that's dead for 150 different reasons. We're not getting into that now. Ministry is accomplished by people, not by professionals. We have to live on mission with God. You're gifted, you're empowered, God's given you passion, given you conviction, and you're supposed to recognize these gifts, and you're supposed to then use those gifts to serve the body of Christ and to influence the world for Jesus. And since we've been forced out of our regular gatherings, I have seen people doing just that. And that's why I say I'm so proud, right? I mean, Tammy is passionate about this, and it's a good thing to be passionate about. And she's passionate about it because of her convictions in Christ. And she's organized something that's influencing people positively for Jesus. Right, Holly was organized a drive-through at the Methodist Richardson Medical Center to celebrate and thank frontline workers. And Methodist Richardson Medical Center posted a video of our people driving through, honking their horns, and they were just like, "Thank you to First Sachse for thinking of us and considering us and doing this." Right, Candace organized a food drive for 5 loaves. And they gathered over 1,200 pounds of food and $1,200 in donations, right, to serve this ministry in our community that's serving so many people who are in need right now. And that is amazing. And we need to see more of that. And I just want to encourage you as we leave, I know this isn't really dealing with the exact topic that we are talking about today, but you are gifted by God and you are empowered by the Spirit of God to accomplish ministry that only you can do. And so, take advantage of opportunity, really wrestle with that. If you're not sure, like, what is my gifting? What is my passion? I'd love to chat with you about that. But this is incredible. And I love this, right? Because I can't, you've got 5 or 6 of us on staff. I can't think off the top of my head. I would name everybody right now, but I didn't prepare to say that. So now I'm like, how many people do we have on staff? We got one, students, kids, me, finance, 7. There's like 8 of us. Yes, I agree with Kaylee and with Rhonda. We have great people. Um, well, 8 staff people cannot conceive of every worthy activity and pursuit a church should take. And then we can't organize all of those things and execute all of those things. It's not really how it works, right? It works when people, gifted by God, see an opportunity to do ministry and seize that opportunity. And so, anyways, I would love to chat with you about that some more. If you have questions about that, or if you're passionate about something, like, man, do it. Like, we don't have to slap a First Sachse sticker on everything we do, right? Just, be led by the Spirit of God, do ministry, influence people for Jesus, make a difference in the world. That's what it means to follow Jesus. All right. Appreciate you guys. We need to wrap this up, I guess, but miss you. We're working on plans for starting in-person worship services. We sent out a survey this week. We sent out a survey, so if you haven't filled that out, because you're informing the decisions that we're going to be making. Okay. And we need to hear from you whether you're ready to come back right away, you want to wait. We've got different precautions that we're going to put in place, etc. And so fill that out if you haven't yet. It'll give us good information to make the best possible decisions. All right. Love you guys. Miss you. And looking forward to getting back into First Peter with you on Sunday. All right. Thank you. Y'all have a good rest of your day.